Hey, I'm Hannah, and welcome to today's episode. We're going to talk about type 1 diabetes diagnosis and the emotional processing that goes on after you learn that you have this disease and what the disease means or could mean for your life. It is so normal and common to have a emotional processing period after any diagnosis. And I knew this to be true with my own type 1 diabetes diagnosis when I was 13, but now I see it every day working as a physician in other people when I diagnose people with Hashimoto's thyroiditis or type 2 diabetes or even high blood pressure. People often have this kind of same emotional processing of, what does this mean for my life now? Am I going to be okay? Am I still going to be able to be me? And that comes out in lots of ways, but I think that one way to look at it is through the 5 stages of grief that we look at as an emotional processing kind of order, which is not the same for everybody, but kind of the feelings that can come after a big challenging event. And what I learned personally with type 1 diabetes is that going through the emotional grappling of what this means for your life is really important. And it is easy, and I certainly did for quite a while, to choose not to think about it from an emotional standpoint, just move right into the data and the studies and the education piece and figuring out what you need to do and when you need to do it, and not actually stop and feel what this means for your life. And I think that often we can get stuck in that emotional processing, in those cycles. Maybe we make it to a certain place and then we kind of shut down. We shut down in the beginning, or we kind of over the years, which is what I feel like it was for me, is kind of unravel, these different stages of understanding what this meant for me and really allowing myself to feel it emotionally. So if you are somebody who has newly been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, whether you're a kid or an adult, welcome. It is a hard thing to fully accept into your life in the beginning, and that is common. I think that is human nature. There's nothing wrong with you if you're having a hard time really getting to a place where you can accept it. What we often think, and this is so much from my patient experience and not as much from my experience as a physician, is what we often think are not necessarily fears, kind of these limiting beliefs or concerns or worries, that come up for today, but more about what's going to happen in the future. And I think that that was something that I turned maybe a blind eye to, didn't ask as many questions in the beginning as I could have. And so I sat with a lot of future fears, which maybe slowed down my personal grieving process. But kind of going through these 5 stages of grief, and I'll talk to you about what it felt like for me and what I see in other people. We'll talk about this processing and how to get to a place where we can make peace with the fact that we have type 1 diabetes, because I think that intuitively is a lot of people's end goal. It doesn't feel good to be angry every day. And I think we kind of all know that. But even comprehending how we could get to a place where we wouldn't be angry about it can be really hard. And I'll be honest, the way that I got there was by meeting other people who had figured out a way to think about it that worked well for them. And I tried on their ideas until I found my own kind of layering of what worked for me as far as perspective. And that's how I got there. It really took other people. It wasn't something that I necessarily kind of invented in my own head. And so I'm here to share with you what works for me as far as those layers of, that kind of perspective that I've chosen about it. But know that they came from just learning from other people and seeing what worked and trying on different things and learning for myself. So the first stage of grief that can come on after a diagnosis is denial. And that one is harder, right, to understand maybe how it could apply, because often when we have type 1 diabetes, it's pretty clear. It's hard to deny, I think, in the beginning when we're getting started. Maybe we go through some denial in our teenager years. That's not uncommon to have kind of this teenager or young adult or even later adult diabetes burnout, where we're just at this place where we just don't want to have to think about how we need to take the insulin every day or test our blood sugar every day. But really, denial, I think, is hard. And really what that looks like is just being able to get to a place where you can accept the reality that you lost a part of what your future could have looked like, right? I think we never imagine our futures with some type of chronic disease, regardless of when we get diagnosed. We typically imagine ourselves in the future, in future chapters, being as we are, maybe growing into more of who we want to be, but certainly not with a chronic illness on top of it. And so just having to get to a place where you can accept, like, hey, I'm gonna have diabetes next year. I'm gonna have diabetes when I am getting married. I'm gonna have diabetes on all my future vacations. I'm gonna have diabetes when I have children or I'm with family. I'm gonna have diabetes when I'm a grandparent. I'm gonna have diabetes for as far as we know, as what we know right now. Of course, there's so much hope for a cure, and I think that's wonderful, but the acceptance of my life is going to look differently in the future is something that is hard to get to a place where we're really able to even look at that, even allow ourselves to think about it. And I think getting past that is empowering, because if we can feel that we don't want to think about these future chapters with type 1 diabetes, and then allow ourselves to accept that diabetes will be there during those, and then get to this place where we can start to say, well, what do I want to learn about that so that it doesn't have to be so fearful? That's when we start that slow traction towards a thought process that feels better. Now, if you're in a stage of denial with type 1, you don't like that you have it, you don't like to talk about it. I didn't like to tell anybody about it. When I was 13, it was maybe over 6 months since I was diagnosed. I didn't tell any of my friends. It was this big secret. I definitely had that denial of wanting to accept it into my life, denial of wanting to let other people know about it because I hadn't accepted it for myself. And so getting to a place where you can accept that you have it and you can start to grapple with, okay, what now, is really beautiful. So if you are on that journey of denial somewhere, know that typically the other side, the acceptance side of diabetes, feels a lot better than the denial side. And maybe just personal experience from myself, and I know a lot of other people that have gotten to that place in their mindset too, is that it's hard to look at in the beginning because you have to grieve a little bit the loss of what you thought your life would look like. But if you allow yourself to really feel that instead of not looking at it, and then you move forward with this thought of, okay, it's going to be there. What can I do about it? How can I get to a place where it being there feels maybe not good initially, maybe it feels okay. It feels acceptable. It feels like something that will be possible for me to get through. That is that kind of first stage of empowerment. Now, the next stage of grief is anger. And that's one that I think can come and go throughout type 1 diabetes. Certainly, I think for me, it used to be more frequent. I was diagnosed at 13, kind of got through high school, didn't have a lot of anger about it. I think I was lucky there. In college, I got kind of angry at times when it was really hard to learn about a new chapter of life and learn about how to manage my type 1 diabetes. And so I started to look at the world around me. I think naturally when you're out of high school, you start to learn more about the world as a whole. And I think I got into this place of like, why me? The anger came for me during that chapter. And that was just this, like, I care about my body. I care about my health. Why did this have to happen to me? Why is it so much harder for me than my peers who maybe don't know anything about metabolism or don't have any challenges with health? I think we get to this place of kind of why me, and that can create anger. The other thing we can be angry about is just the fact that we have to do it, is that angry because I had to balance my blood sugars during finals week and I didn't get graded differently than all the other people in my classes. Like, is that fair? That was frustrating at times when I let myself go into that victim kind of mindset about it. I had anger I had anger sometimes when I felt like I couldn't be perfect about it. That was actually a big one for me in my college years, was really wanting to tell myself, maybe after coming out of the denial, that the way that it was going to be okay in my life is if I perfected it. If I got really, really, really good at it, my blood sugars were in normal non-diabetic ranges almost all of the time, then I would be at a place where I wouldn't have, these big future complication fears, which I think are sometimes kind of over exaggerated in the diabetes community, or I would maybe I would be able to kind of like control it, and the control would give me a sense of peace where it wasn't controlling me. And that's not at all what ended up working for me to continue thinking to get out of the anger. But I think that that's kind of this piece is I was angry at myself for a while. It's like, why can't I get this? Why can't I make it more manageable? Why can't I make it more in range? What is wrong with me that I can't have these perfect superstar 5.4, 5.6 A1Cs that some people have? What's wrong with me? I was angry at myself. So that was kind of a stage where I wasn't so angry at the cards that were dealt to me, the health cards, that were dealt, but just angry at how I was able to manage them. That does not work for empowerment or feeling good or being happy or frankly healthy long term. So that was one I had to kind of work through. And I think a lot of the anger came from understanding that continuing to feel sorry for myself or expect myself to be so perfect with blood sugar management wasn't going to be a healthy life. And the way that I got there, I think, with this one was the hard way, because I ate an incredibly low carb diet. I was so structured with my meal prep. I stopped going out to eat at restaurants with friends, or I might go, but I would order a drink, or a glass of water or something. I wouldn't actually have food with carbs because I was worried how unpredictable they might be. And I was able to get my blood sugar really flatlined, really nice. I had one of those kind of 5 point something, I can't remember. It's not important to me as much as it was back then. I made 5.5, 5.6 A1Cs for a little while, but I lived in a box. I acted like a robot. That's funny, that's my Freestyle Libre going off right now. That I need to take some correction. It looks like I'm 180. So what we see with that though is really looking at this, not getting to a place where I felt like I could live like a normal human. I could live this perfect diabetes robot life, but that wasn't happy or healthy. And that was my end goal. So I think I got so far into that box and I made it smaller and smaller until I got to this perfect place and realized, hey, you could have perfect blood sugars and you can still feel very broken. And you can have perfect blood sugars and you can still feel very different and unable to create community and unable to feel connected to people. And that's not a way to live. And so that is ultimately how I got past my anger. Hopefully you can learn more stories like mine and other people's so that you can learn, from other people's trials with it. But I think some of this stuff, ultimately, you have to learn. You have to live. And I think continuing to learn from other people's mindsets, even today, really helps me as I think about future chapters of my life. So there's the denial, there's the anger. And again, I want to say these don't always come into this or come out in the same order for different people. The next one is bargaining. And this is really kind of trying to get to a place where you can go back and forth, really wanting to understand that maybe if you blame something for it, maybe there was a virus, the flu that you had or whatever it was, and you tell yourself this story of why type 1 diabetes is not your fault. And if you are new with type 1 diabetes, it is not your fault. It's something that happens to us. I think sometimes even happens for us. I feel like I've looked up a lot of good that came from my life with type 1 diabetes so far, but it is not something that we did to ourselves or anyone else did to us. And I think it's important to know that. I think sometimes we maybe in the diagnosis process as physicians skip over that part. So don't feel like you have to bargain the why. I think that that's really sometimes just a gap in knowledge about medicine. Don't feel like you have to bargain the why. And often the bargaining comes with, what are we going to let this look like for our lives, right? Bargaining that, do I need the perfect A1C? What A1C do I want? Bargaining with myself on what I thought I could do. And that was a big one. And that one maybe still comes out in different chapters of my life, is I was a competitive dancer in high school. Could I be on the dance team and have type 1 diabetes? Could I go to college and have type 1 diabetes and live on campus and have a roommate in a dorm? Was that going to be safe or possible? Could I go to medical school? That was a big hang up I had. I thought that seems really hard. Diabetes is hard. Can I do both of those things at the same time? I wasn't really sure. And I think that you kind of had to bargain with myself, and what I thought I could do. And there's still nothing I have found that I have been able to finally conclude that I couldn't do because of type 1 diabetes, anything that I wanted to do. So that bargaining piece is interesting, and it may come on, in different types of life as we reach new thresholds. Maybe you've never done international travel, but when it comes time to finally book the flight and you have the opportunity, you're wondering if you could do it with type 1 or if it's going to be safe or what that's going to look like. And so bargaining piece, I think, comes on in different chapters with new thresholds. But it's important just to understand that as we look at our life with type 1 diabetes, we don't have to invent the wheel. I mean, we certainly can do things that haven't been done before, but there is so often someone else out there that's done something that you want to do with type 1 diabetes. And now with Google, we can find those people, look at examples of how they lived their lives or an interview that they did or whatever, it is that you're looking for. Is that we've got a lot of access to community and examples online, which is really wonderful. I think that was not something that I had growing up until maybe my college years. And so I feel like I missed some of that, or I filled in the gaps of unknown with what I thought to be true about diabetes. And that was hard for me. So find out if you don't know before you tell yourself a scarcity story, because I think that's kind of what we default into, or certainly that's what I defaulted into. And then the fourth stage of grief is depression. And that is this true kind of feeling of sadness, that processing of, I'm going to have, let's see, an example from earlier, I have type 1 diabetes on all of my vacations for the rest of my life. I mean, that's saddening, right? It's just thinking about like, oh man, I might not be able to sleep in as well on vacation because I might have to get up and test my blood sugar, or I'm gonna have to figure out how to keep my insulin cool every time I go to the beach in the summer for the rest of my life. That's a new thing, right? That you have to add on to what you want to be doing that you didn't expect to. And it can look like other things too. It can look like just being really sad that you don't have the flexibility that you used to, or that you have to plan more. Maybe you feel this moment you can be less spontaneous. And I don't know if that's necessarily true for everybody, but certainly that's true when there's a kind of time that we're learning about how to take care of ourselves with it. And I think that, understanding that sadness, that depression, those feelings are temporary. They don't have to be long lasting. They don't have and they don't have to be long lasting. They don't have to be something that we never feel either. They can be something that we allow ourselves to feel. It's okay to cry about it. It's so okay to cry about type 1 diabetes. It's okay to allow ourselves a couple days just to think about it and sit in it and breathe through it. I don't think in the direction of living a happy, healthy life with type 1 diabetes that choosing to steep in it, though, gets us there faster. I think there's a healthy balance in the middle, and everybody's different with it, but figuring out how much you want to let yourself feel it, and then how much you want to learn how to see a life in the future with it, differently in a way that can be positively aligned. And then the last stage of grief is acceptance. And this one is really important. And I do think it comes after the others typically. And it's really allowing yourself to kind of get through those stages of grief barriers we discussed up until this one, and then get to a place where we are able to look diabetes in the eye and say, it's going to be here, right? It's part of who I am now. It certainly doesn't have to be what I wrap my life around, but it's here. And what am I going to do about it? And how am I going to learn to love life with it? And when we get to that place, I feel like anything is possible. I mean, once we're in that mindset of really understanding that whatever we want in life can be done with type 1 diabetes if we plan for it, if we consider it, if we look into what's possible. And what we want in life often changes, and that's normal too. But we don't have to feel held back by type 1 diabetes, in my opinion. I really think, if anything, my life being an example, I feel like type 1 diabetes has pushed me into becoming more of who I am. It's really pushed me into things I wanted to do more. It's given me bravery when I wanted to help someone, but I was nervous. Even recording these videos when I first started was terrifying. But I knew that if I had had somebody talking about their life with type 1 diabetes when I was 15 that I could look up and listen to, or when I was 21, or when I was in college confused and stuck in that box we talked about, it would have helped me so much get past those unknowns, that fear sooner. And so that pushed me to do things like this, which now create so much fulfillment and excitement for my life. So I'm grateful for type 1 diabetes. It definitely took me stages of grief to get there, but it's important to know that you do not have to live life with type 1 diabetes and feel sorry for yourself because you have it. There are other ways out there of thinking about it. Hopefully this video provided some examples for you. I'm gonna go correct that 180 blood sugar I got going on, and I will hopefully see you guys next time. If you're new to type 1 diabetes, my intent is to post a lot more new type 1 videos on this channel, so please subscribe if this helped you. I'd love to create more content in the direction of getting you those answers that are hard to find online otherwise. So thanks for being here, and I hope to see you next time.